Bitcoin is magical, and it is truly the innovation. It's like a singularity because it represents the first time in the history of the human race that we managed. The goal is to create $1 billion block of pure energy in cyberspace, one that I could then move with no friction at the speed of light. Right? It's the equivalent to putting a million pounds in orbit. How do I actually launch something into orbit, right? How do I launch something into cyberspace such that it moves friction free? And the solution is a decentralized proof of work network, right? Satoshi's solution was, I'm going to establish a protocol running on a distributed set of computers that will maintain a constant supply of never more than 21 million Bitcoins. Now, the innovation is to create that in a ethical, durable fashion, right? The ethical innovation is, I want it to be property and not a security. A bushel of corn, an acre of land, a stack of lumber, and a bar of gold, and a Bitcoin are all property. And that means they're all commonly occurring elements in the world. You could call them commodities, but commodity is a little bit misleading, and I'll tell you why in a second. But they're all distinguished by the fact that no one entity or person or government controls them. If you have a barrel of oil, and you're in Ukraine versus Russia versus Saudi Arabia versus the US, you have a barrel of oil, right? And it doesn't matter what the premier in Japan or the mayor of Miami Beach thinks about your barrel. They cannot wave their hand and make it not a barrel of oil or a cord of wood, right? And so property is just a naturally occurring element in the universe. If it's a security would be an example of a share of a stock or a crypto token controlled by a small team. And in the event that something is a security because some small group or some identifiable group can control its nature, character, supply, then it really only becomes ethical to promote it or sell it pursuant to fair disclosures. So I'll give you maybe a practical example. I'm the mayor of Chicago. I give a speech. My speech, I say, I think everybody in Chicago should own their own farm and have a chicken in the backyard and their own horse and an automobile. That's ethical. I give the same speech and I say, I think everybody in Chicago should buy Twitter stock, sell their house or sell their cash and buy Twitter stock. Well, is that ethical? Not really. Well, at that point, you've entered into a conflict of interest because what you're doing is you're promoting an asset which is substantially controlled by a small group of people, the board of directors or the CEO of the company. So how would you feel if the president of the United States said, I really think Americans should all buy Apple stock? Talk about property. I mean, the challenge here is, how do I create something that's equivalent to a barrel of oil in cyberspace? And that means it has to be a non-sovereign bearer instrument, open, permissionless, not censorable, right? If I could do that, then I could deliver you 10,000 dematerialized barrels of oil, and you would take settlement of them, and you would know that you have possession of that property, irregardless of the opinion of any politician or any company or anybody else in the world. That's a really critical characteristic, and it actually is. It's probably one of the fundamental things that makes Bitcoin special. Bitcoin isn't just a crypto asset network. It's easy to create a crypto asset network. It's very hard to create an ethical crypto asset network, because you have to create one without any government or corporation or investor exercising undue influence to make it successful. Is that Bitcoin is the most difficult property that the human race possesses or has yet invented to confiscate. And that's by virtue of the fact that you could take possession of it via your private keys. So, if you got your 12 seed phrases in your head, then that would be the highest form of property right, because I literally have to crack your head open and read your mind to take it. It doesn't mean I couldn't extract it from you under duress, but it means that it's harder than every other thing you might own. If you, in fact, it's exponentially harder. If you consider every other thing you might own, a car, a house, a share of stock, gold, diamonds, property rights, intellectual property rights, movie rights, music rights, anything imaginable, they would all be easier by orders and orders of magnitude to seize. So digital property in the form of a set of private keys is by far the apex property. Bitcoin is magical, and it is truly the innovation. It's like a singularity, because it represents the first time in the history of the human race that we managed to create a digital property, properly understood. It's easy to create something digital, right? Every coupon and every skin on Fortnite and Roblox and Apple TV credits and all these things, they're all digital something, but they're securities, right? Shares of stock are securities. Whenever anybody when you transfer money on PayPal or Apple Pay, you're transferring, in essence, a security or an IOU. Mm-hmm. And so transferring a bearer instrument with final settlement in the internet domain or in cyberspace, that's a critical thing. And anybody in the crypto world can do that. All the cryptos can do that. But what they can't do, what 99% of them fail to do, is be property. They're securities. I can move any amount of Bitcoin in a matter of minutes for dollars on layer one. The second important feature of the layer one is I need the money to last forever, right? I need the money indestructible, immortal. So the bigger trick is not to move $1 billion from here to Tokyo. The big trick is to move $1 billion from here to the year 2140. And that's what we want to solve with layer one. And the best real metaphor in New York City would be the granite or the schist. What you want is a city block of bedrock. And how long has it been there? Like millions of years it's been there. And how fast do you want it to move? You don't. In fact, the single thing that's most important is that it not deflect. If it deflects a foot in 100 years, it's too much. If it deflects an inch in 100 years, you might not want that. So the layer one of Bitcoin is a foundation upon which you put weight. How much weight can you put on it? You put 1 trillion, 10 trillion, 100 trillion, a quadrillion. How much weight's on the bedrock in Manhattan, right? Think about 100-story buildings. So the real key there is the foundational asset needs to be there at all. So the fact that you can create $100 trillion layer one that would stand for 100 years, that is the revolutionary breakthrough first time. And the fact that it's ethical, right? It's ethical and it's common property, global, permissionless. Extremely unlikely that would happen. People tried 50 times before and they all failed. They tried 15,000 times after, and they've all generally failed. 98% have failed, and a couple have been less successful. But for the most part, that's an extraordinary thing. What we want is immortality, immortal, incorruptible, indestructible, right? That's what you want, integrity from the layer one. Now there's layer two and layer three, and layer two I would define as an open, permissionless, non-custodial protocol that uses the underlying layer one token as its gas fee. So the Lightning Network will sit on top of layer one. It'll sit on top of Bitcoin, and it solves what you want to do is solve the problem of, it's well and fine, I don't want to move $1 billion every day. What I want to move is $5 a billion times a day. So if I want to move $5 a billion times a day, I don't really need to put the entire $1 trillion of assets at risk every time I move $5. All I really need to do is put $100,000 in a channel or $1 million in a channel, and then I do 10 million transactions where I have $1 million at risk. And of course, it's kind of simple. If I lower my security requirement by a factor of 1 million, I can probably move the stuff 1 million times faster, right? And that's how Lightning works. It's non-custodial because there's no corporation or custodian or counterparty you're trusting, right? There's the risk of moving through the channel, but Lightning is an example of how I go from 350,000 transactions a day to 350 million transactions a day. So on that layer 2, you could move the Bitcoin in seconds for fractions of pennies. Mm-hmm. If you want to move Bitcoin in milliseconds for free, you move it through Binance or Coinbase or Cash App. So this is a very straightforward thing. I mean, it seems pretty obvious when you think about it that there are going to be hundreds of thousands of layer 3s. There may be dozens of layer 2s. Lightning is A1, but it's not the only one. Anybody can invent something. The difference between digital property and physical property is when you own a building in Los Angeles and the city politics turn against you, you can't move the building. Yeah. And when you own a share of a security that's like a US traded security and you wish to move to some other country, you can't take the security with you either. And when you own a bunch of gold and you try to get through the airport, they might not let you take it. So Bitcoin is advantageous versus all those because you actually do have the option to withdraw your asset from the exchange. And if you had Bitcoin with Fidelity and you had shares of stock with Fidelity, and if you had bonds and sovereign debt with Fidelity, and if you own some mutual funds and some other random limited partnerships with Fidelity, none of those things can be removed from the custodian. But the Bitcoin you can take off the exchange, you can remove from the custodians because you have the optionality to withdraw all your assets from the crypto exchange. You can enforce fairness. And at the point where you disagree with their policies, you can, within an hour, move your assets to another counterparty or take personal custody of those assets. And you don't have that option with most other forms of property. Maybe you don't have as much optionality with any other form of property on Earth. And so what makes digital property distinct is the fact that it has the most optionality for custody.